everyone, welcome to Stern Effects. This is the first tutorial in a series about the best feature for any Adobe software, which is integration. The main app that we are going to integrate with is, of course, After Effects. And in this tutorial, I'll talk about the integration with Photoshop. So I'll show you how to prepare your files, how to manage the colors, and talk about the pros and the cons, what works and what is broken. Alright, let's begin. If you read the official help page, the link is down below, it will tell you that because After Effects includes the Photoshop rendering engine, After Effects imports all attributes of Photoshop files, including position, blending modes, opacity, visibility, transparency, layer masks, layer groups that are imported as nested compositions, adjustment layers, layer styles, layer clipping path, vector masks, image guides, and clipping groups. As we will see in a moment, this is not entirely true and not straightforward as you may think. Now, I'm not trying to bash the help document. Actually, it's filled with great advice about preparing files and arranging them for both Photoshop and Illustrator, and I highly recommend for you to read it. What I am saying is that you may encounter strange and unexpected behaviors when you'll bring multi-layered Photoshop files or documents that has few artboards to After Effects. So my goal in this video is to show you how to work around those limitations and offer my 2 pence based on my experience. Unfortunately, Adobe didn't update this workflow in the last 15 years, and I'm hopeful they will attend it in the future. But until it will happen, here are most of the gotchas and how to get around them. So here we are inside Photoshop, and I've got this open document that consists of 2 artboards. Each one of these artboards have few layers inside. So let's say that we want to bring this into After Effects and start working on this social post. So I'll switch to After Effects and I'll double click to bring the import dialog on screen. I'll navigate to the file that I just showed you. We already see in the preview that After Effects recognized those 2 artboards, but let's see what happened when I'll click on Open. By the way, if you're working on the PC side, it's going to say Import. So in this case, After Effects is bringing this file as a flattened image. It didn't even let me choose layers from this document. I can double click on this and see that indeed everything is being flattened down for me. And the reason is because this is the wrong format, which is one of the biggest gotchas. So I'm just going to delete the file from the project panel, return back to Photoshop, and I want to call your attention to the fact that the mode of the document is CMYK color, and After Effects is the land of RGB. So it's not designed to work with this color model. If you do bring something which is not RGB, you will be able to import it, but After Effects will not show you the layers. So the first thing you always need to do is switch the color mode to RGB color. You can do it from the Properties panel, or you can also go to Image, Mode, and switch it from here. Now, it's going to ask you here inside Photoshop, do you want to merge the layers? Of course, you don't want to merge the layers, so click Don't Merge. And then it will prompt you to rasterize the smart objects as well as other vector layers. And over here, we also don't want to rasterize. So make sure to click on Don't Merge and Don't Rasterize on both dialog boxes. And now I'm going to save over the same file by pressing Command S, Control S on Windows, of course. And again, I'll hop back into After Effects, double click to bring the import dialog, select this file again and click Open. And now I'm going to get the import kind dialog, which asks me how I want to bring this footage. So by default, it will just merge everything as I showed you before. But you can also bring it as a composition. And this means that each one of the layers is going to be a different layer here in After Effects, but the size is going to be the size of the image inside Photoshop. So in 99% of the times, you want to select this one, Composition, Retain Layer Sizes. I'll speak more about those two options in a moment. For now, I'm just going to click OK and show you that indeed, if I'll double click to open this composition, we are getting some of what we were expecting. So because we have two artboards, this is the first one, and underneath we have the second one. But it's not exactly what we want. We can double click on each one of those comps, but as you can see, the cropping of the document, in this case, the composition, is not the same as those two individual artboards. So the conclusion is that as things stand now, you can't bring a multiple artboard document from Photoshop to After Effects. You need to first separate the document inside Photoshop and then bring each one of the artboard individually. So let me show you how to do this. First, I'm going to say goodbye to everything that I have over here. So I'll delete this. I'll switch back to Photoshop, and then I'll go to File, Export, and choose Artboards to Files. Now, I need to make sure that nothing is selected here. So before doing this, just to be sure that you are with me on the same point, I'm just going to close those two artboards and click somewhere outside. Because if you are going to select something, Photoshop is just going to export the selected artboards, which is something that you may want to do. But in this case, I want to bring both of them as an individual document into After Effects. All right, so I'll go again to File and then choose Export, Artboards to Files. Over here, I can give this file name a prefix. So depending on what I want to do, I'm just going to browse to the desktop and save a copy over here. If you want, you can choose a different file type, but since we want access to all the individual layers, this is what we want to do. So a PSD file, and then I'll click Run. So you need to be patient with it. It will take a moment or two. You will see things are flickering on screen, and then you will get this message that the Artboard to File command was successfully executed. So I'll click OK, and I'll bring back After Effects, and then I'll double click again, navigate to the desktop, and over here I have those two artboards separated as two different documents. So I will need to select each one and import it individually. Notice what will happen if I select both of them. Just to show you again another gotcha. If I click open, it will just bring everything as a flattened file. It didn't even let me choose the option to separate them to different layers. So this is not the way to work. Again, I'll delete this. And the reason that I'm showing you broken things is just because I want to save you some time in the future. All right, so let's see how to work with it correctly. I'll double click again in the project panel. I'll select first artboard, and then here again, another gotcha. I'll need to switch off the Photoshop sequence, which is switched on by default because After Effects is seeing this suffix with the same name, and it thinks that this is probably an image sequence, which is not. So I'll make sure this is unchecked, and then I'll click Open, which is going to show me again this dialog. And over here, as promised, I want to explain that if we have layer styles in the document, which we have in this case, we will be able to edit them inside After Effects with some limitations. I will return to it in a moment. One of the ways to work around this limitation is to merge the layer style into the footage, basically render it or rasterize it as pixels. All right, so I'm just going to select this default behavior, click OK, and it's going to open up inside After Effects. Now, if I'll double click, I will see the Artboard 1 as the main comp. So if I want to get into all of these layers, I'll need to double click again, and finally, I can start animating it. Now, again, another important feature that you must take under account is that After Effects is going to use the last duration when you bring stuff from Photoshop or Illustrator. And this is something you need to bear in mind because as you can see here, we have some pre-comps, And those precomps, if I'll double click on the shapes, for example, are also 5 seconds long. Now, there are scripts that can work around this limitation, but if you know from the get-go that you want to create something which is longer, then my recommended workflow before even starting to work in this composition is to once again say goodbye to everything, then create a comp and choose your desired duration. So right now, I'm going to change the new composition duration that I'm creating here inside After Effects to 10 seconds by typing in 10 period. And then I'll click OK. And this will register this new length in the After Effects buffer memory. And now, of course, I can say goodbye to this comp, return to the input dialog, and then bring again the artboard from Photoshop that I just exported. So making sure the Photoshop sequence is not selected, I'll select the first one, I'll click Open, I'm going to accept all of these defaults, click OK, and as you will see right now, the document is in the correct dimensions, which are going to be taken from the Photoshop file, and the length is the new length. So it is much easier to make this shorter than longer. All right, I'm going to leave this one open, double click again in the project panel, bring the second artboard over here, and I'll just repeat the same steps. Then double click on this one and double click on the artboard to have a look inside. Now, if you don't need the master comp over here, you can safely just delete it, but you'll need to find it under the folder contents over here. So do note that all the files which are regular layers are going to be automatically organized inside this folder, which is going to be named after your Photoshop document, and any precomps are going to be visible over here as well. So it's totally up to you how you want to work. I just want to make sure that you are aware of these things. So I'll close this one as well as this one, leaving me just with Artboard 1 and Artboard 2, and then I'll switch back to Photoshop because you may or may not notice that the colors are not looking the same. So this is again Photoshop, and this is After Effects. Over here we have a much more vivid appearance of the colors. Hopefully you can see it through the YouTube compression. So this is again another gotcha that you need to sort, starting with Photoshop. So I'll go back to Photoshop, and then I'll go to Edit, Color Settings, and I want to choose the correct working space. So by default, Photoshop and Illustrator are going to be set as sRGB. I'll switch them to Rec 709, which is more or less similar to the sRGB, but it's more appropriate for video color space, especially HD. So I'll click OK, and I'll need to update the file, so I'll press Command S. Again, you won't see a big difference here inside Photoshop, but if I switch back to After Effects, After Effects doesn't know anything about the change that we did. We need to define the colors over here as well. So I'll click on this 8-bit per channel, which is going to take me, this is a button that will open up the project settings and will take me directly to the color tab. And over here, I need to set the working color space to the same one. So you can see it assumed the working gamma is Rec 709, but it doesn't know anything about the working color space. So let's switch it to the same one that we've just selected inside Photoshop, and then click OK. And now the colors are going to look identical for both artboard number 1, and let's switch for a moment to artboard number 2. Hopefully you saw there was a little bit of a switch when After Effects updated the video display. And now we can finally start to work. So let's have a closer look and see how Photoshop is sending those files to After Effects, what After Effects is going to create for us, what is going to be updated simultaneously, and what is not. So anytime you are bringing folders into After Effects, and by folders, I mean folders inside the Layers panel in Photoshop, they are going to become precomps, as we can see over here. Now, if you are changing something in the Photoshop document in terms of position, blending modes, opacity, visibility, things like these are not going to be updated after you're bringing the files into After Effects. So let me show you an example. I'll click to show the transfer controls, which are the blending modes and the track mattes here inside After Effects. And we can see that for some of the layers, the blending mode is set to normal. But just to show you what happens behind the scenes here, if I select one of the layers and go to the Edit menu and then choose Edit Original, you can also press Command E here on the Mac, Control E on the Windows side. This is going to switch you to Photoshop and open up the file that we are using. So take a note, we are not using anymore the multi-artboard file over here. So if you're going to make any amendments over here, those are not going to be reflected in the After Effects version. Remember, we separated this file. So let's just close it, not to be confused, and work with this copy. So I want to show you something. Let's say that I'm going to move this lady, changing the layer position, let's say over here, as well as select the rectangle, which is a shape layer, and maybe also change the blending mode. I'm going to go with color burn, as well as select the main title, WAM, and change the opacity to 50 by pressing 5 on the numeric keypad. And then I'll update this file by pressing Command S. Switch back to After Effects, and we can see nothing has been changed here. Because if you're going to do these modifications, so changing the position, opacity, or blending mode after the file is already here inside After Effects, those changes are not going to be reflected. But if I'll change the transparency, for example, and let me show you what I mean by going back to Photoshop, and then let's continue with the main title here. I'll create a layer mask for it, and then I'll click B to select the brush tool, and then press X to switch between the foreground and background colors, and just hide part of the title here. Again, I'll press Command S to update the file, bring After Effects back to the front, and you can see that this change is being reflected. So you need to be mindful not to do those changes after the file is already here. Now, if I will bring this file again, everything that we are seeing here inside Photoshop is going to be reflected in After Effects. But again, I can't change it after the fact. Now, I don't want all of these changes. So inside Photoshop, I'm just going to undo a few times until I'll get back to this version. I'll return back to the rectangle tool, and I'll press Command S again to update the file, return to After Effects, and as you can see, After Effects is getting a phone call from Photoshop, and everything that it can support live is going to be updated, which is the transparency. So transparency is a two-way street. Now, as you saw, all of the folders in this document, for example, the shapes folder, which consists of 2 shapes, is being translated to a precomp here inside After Effects, as well as the lower text. If I'll open it, this has the double the font title that we can see over here, as well as all the copy underneath. So if I want to work with those layers as live text inside After Effects, I need to first un-precomp them. Now, I have a full tutorial about how to do this, but now I'll give you the short version. You'll need to download a free extension called AEUX. The link is in the description, as well as a link to see the entire tutorial. And over here, you'll need to open up Groups. I'll scroll down, and you have this Un-precomp button. So I'm going to select the lower text comp and click on Un-precomp, which is just going to delete this comp and bring those 2 layers to the main hierarchy. I'll leave the shapes as is for now, and I'll close this panel. Now, notice also that by default, this is showing us the source name. If I want to see the same names that I can see inside the Layers panel in Photoshop, notice all of these names, I can click on Source Name here in After Effects, and it's going to show me the same names. So again, my recommended workflow is just to switch to Layer Name and then continue from there. Now, the next step is to convert all the text pixel layers to an editable text, because maybe we want to use After Effects to animate this text. So the workflow here, after un-precomposing the layers, is to select all the layers here, except of the precomp, of course, and then go to the layer menu, and from the create options, choose convert to editable text. And now these layers are live text here inside After Effects, and everything will survive. So assuming you have the fonts installed in your system, you will see that the leading, the colors, everything that we set up inside Photoshop, we can continue to work with it over here inside After Effects, including, by the way, and I'll open it up, the layer styles. So if I'll twirl down the layer styles, I can see that I can switch on and off the drop shadow. Which brings me to show you the things that are not fully supported. So let's start with those layer styles. I'll switch back to Photoshop just to show you that over here, if I'll select the title and expand the FX, those layer styles are actually called effect as well. We have the drop shadow that we just saw inside After Effects. If I'll double click on it, it will open up the layer styles dialog, and I can actually add to some of these more than just a single operator. So for example, I can add multiple drop shadows, as many as I want, up to 10, but these are not going to be supported inside After Effects. In fact, it doesn't matter what I'll do. If I'll choose to bring this with an editable layer styles, I will only have access to the first one that I set over here. So if you need to work around this limitation, then when you import the multi-layered file into After Effects, you need to rasterize those multiple drop shadows or strokes or inner shadows or whatever you are using in this dialog. Maybe this is going to change in the future, but for now, this is it. I'll cancel out of this, and I'll call your attention to the fact that we have few special layers here. For example, this background color is actually an adjustment color using this solid color option. And I'm here to tell you that some of the things here are not going to be translated into After Effects as live adjustment layers. So solid color, gradient, pattern, these are going to be rendered when you bring the layers into After Effects. You won't be able to edit them. However, brightness and contrast, level, curves, exposure, vibrance, and all the other stuff that After Effects has equivalent effects are going to be supported. So you will get the controls to change them inside After Effects. So just be mindful again, depending on what you are using here. Now, there are also a few other things that are not going to be fully supported. Let's start with this shapes folder, where I have these circles and mask around her face. Now here inside Photoshop, if I zoom in by selecting the layer and pressing Command plus a few times, these are native vector files. And some of them are actually objects that I can change after the fact. So there are live objects. When I'll return to After Effects and check this layer, I'll close the text layer and double click on the shapes. We can see that we just got this pixel-based image. However, if we're going to take a closer look over here by zooming into the layer, we can see that After Effects by default, when we are bringing vector layers, is going to create masks for them. So you may or may not find this useful. There are some workarounds to what you can do with this, but in its most basic form, these are not continuously rasterized layer. So if I'll select both of them and just scale them, we are going to lose resolution. Again, there are workarounds here, but in this case, I just want to show you how you're going to get those layers by default from Photoshop. All right, I'll close this and I'll return back to the first artboard. And let's switch back to Photoshop just to mention a few other things. So if you're working with embedded Illustrator files, these are also going to be pixelated, so rasterized, when you are going to bring them into After Effects. The same is true for smart objects and video layers. So in this case, as you can see, I have few treatments that I created to this footage. So I have this smart filter, which is the color halftone, and I can switch it on and off here inside Photoshop. So basically, smart filters are the Photoshop equivalent of effects. Now, I can't have access to these things inside After Effects. So if I want to modify them, I need to open up this file, and then I can switch off the visibility of this. I can save the file over here. This is going to update the pixels. And once I'll return to After Effects, this is going to show up because, again, in After Effects, this is a pixel-based layer which is connected to the smart object inside Photoshop. So again, just something to bear in mind. And also the same is true for layer masks. So layer masks are going to be baked into the layer. And again, just to illustrate this, I already showed it to you before, but just to make sure you get the point, I'll create a layer mask on top of this smart object. I'll switch to the brush tool, and then I'll lower the diameter and just take away the opacity over here by drawing on this layer mask. The moment I'll save the file, this is going to be reflected inside After Effects, but I won't be able to edit the layer mask. And by the way, this is not true for clipping masks. So again, let me just switch back to Photoshop. I'll undo the last operation. I actually don't need this mask in the Photoshop document. So I'm just going to update the file and then switch back to After Effects. And I'll show you the other artboard that we brought. Selecting one of these layers, pressing Command E to open it here inside Photoshop. We can see that we have 3 live text layers here. Switching back to After Effects, we need to select those layers. In this case, I'll right click on one of them and then choose Create, Convert to Editable Text. And then I'm going to look inside the composition, which in Photoshop is a folder. So by double clicking on this Elements comp, I can take a look inside and see what's happening here. So as I told you, all of these shapes, and again, let me just show you what we have here. These are vector shapes. These are going to be translated to just masks inside After Effects. So there are some form, I guess, of a non-destructive vector shape, but not the same one that we are going to get from Illustrator. But what's more interesting, if I'll switch back again to Photoshop, hopefully I'm not confusing you by jumping back and forth between those two apps, but I really want to illustrate something. So let's say that I do want to get access to the layer mask. So instead of working with layer mask, I can actually create a clipping mask here inside Photoshop, which is what I have over here. So I have this smart object. Let me just turn it on and off, which is captured or encapsulated inside this shape. So this shape is basically a mask, and this layer lives inside the mask. And again, to illustrate it, I'm just going to select the layer and move it left and right here in Photoshop so you can see the setup. All right, I'll undo, and then I'll show you what happened inside After Effects. So because I'm using clipping masks, this is going to be converted to a pre-comp. I'll double click again, and inside it, there is this shape. So I'll need to dive even deeper inside this pre-comp. And now I see that I have this shape, which is an individual layer. And After Effects, for this layer, enabled automatically the Preserve Transparency button. So this layer is looking down through the transparent pixels underneath, the combined transparent pixels, by the way. To make it more easy to understand, I'll toggle the transparency grid. And this means that here inside After Effects, I still have control, and I can move this layer and change it the same way I can do inside Photoshop. So again, if you need this functionality, use clipping masks. Okay, I'm just going to close all of these layers, and I'm actually going to return to the original, the first artboard. And after seeing what we can and can't do, let me show you how I would approach this animation. So I'm going to first hide those shapes, These are here just for the sake of demonstration. Obviously, I need to change this girl. So I'm just going to assume that this was a design handed over from the design department, and now I need to quickly animate it as an Instagram reel. So I'll go to the project, I'll double click to bring the import dialog on screen, and then I'll grab the file that I need from the Adobe stock free collection. So apparently I have some experience with this file. I know that this is the one that I want to use. I'll double click. As you can see, this is the full video without the transparent background. So first we need to find the frame that we want to start. So let's go with 4 seconds here, create an in point, and then I'm going to just overlay, edit this video to my comp. We can now close this comp viewer, and then I'll just bring it on top of the footage and switch off momentarily the visibility of this footage. Then we need to take care of the background. So to do this, I'll go to Effect, and from the keying category, I'll choose the color range effect. I'll click to sample the purple color, and then add few colors over here in this window. Maybe additional cleanup in this department. And then I'll go to Effect, and this time from the keying category, I'll choose the Key Cleaner effect, which is going to help me with the edges. I think I need a little bit more extra help, so I'll go again to the Effect menu, and from the Matte category, I'll add the Simple Choker effect, and let's just choke 1 pixel. Okay, this looks great, but of course this is not the correct size. So I'll change the order of those 2 layers, and I'll use this one as a reference. So now I'll select the video again, press S to isolate the scale, and I'm just going to scale it so it will look more or less the same dimensions as I got from the designer, something along those lines. Let's preview it and see how this works. I think she is just obscuring the title too much. So again, I'll do a bit of scaling down just to match the design as closely as possible. All right, this looks like it is working. And now let's have some fun with the text. And this is just to illustrate why we converted those titles to live text here inside After Effects. So I'll start with the main title. This is Wham! And then I'll go to the effects and presets, and I'll highlight the search box and start to look for a few presets that I think will work here. So let's go with double helix for the main text. I'll double click to apply it and preview it. This looks nice. She doesn't agree, but I think it's good. Now let's select the BAM layer, which is this one over here. And again, I think that for this one, I'm going to use the quiver under the text organic preset animation. So double click to apply it. And this is how it looks together. And for double the fun, I want something which is very fun and wavy. So I'll start to type ocean. And I happen to know that Ocean Tide is one of those presets that can work for this title. So double click to apply it. Let's see the default settings, which are just too high. So a bit of a seasick, I feel. I'll change the magnitude of this slider to, let's go with 7 and have a look at it again. A little bit more modest, and I think it's communicating what we want. And last but not least, I'll select the follow copy over here, and I'll apply the word processor animation, which is something that has a blinking cursor. Now, the problem in this case is that it doesn't reveal the entire text. So I'll need to select the layer, press U to see the keyframes. I think I'll stretch it to be under 4 seconds, something like this. And then I'll need to go to the type on slider and expand it until all of the text is visible. Now I'm going to trim the entire thing to 5 seconds by changing the working area, right-clicking on it, and select Trim Comp to Work Area. Maybe this one wants to be only 3 seconds, and then let's have a look from the beginning. And this is it. So this is how you can animate a multi-layered Photoshop file inside After Effects after learning about all the limitations, the pros and the cons, and working around them. So I hope this can be useful in your own work, and I also hope that you will join me in the next video where I'll talk about integration with Illustrator. Until then, take care and have a great day. Goodbye.